Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our Day 8 daily briefing between the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida and Democrats abroad. We're so happy to have each and every one of you over on our program. As always, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat box. We're happy to get to them. We're happy to address them throughout our program. But without further ado, let's go and get started with the headlines. As you know, that's how we always begin our program. I think that's the best way to describe this mostly is simply there is still drama unfolding at COP28. Sultan Al Jaber, as we've mentioned before, is the president of COP28, has held 3 press conferences in the last 2 days, trying to showcase his grand vision and taking credit for victories made at COP28. This despite the fact that there are no clear actual resolutions, nothing in stone, nothing written, nothing agreed to, nothing signed that showcases anything about the phasing out of fossil fuels. In fact, perhaps this is the biggest load of contention at this conference is the fact that there are no strong languages regarding the phasing out of fossil fuels, ditching fossil fuels, or actually even mentioning fossil fuels in any sort of context. Although he is out there saying that we need to get out of our comfort zones as he speaks to the other world leaders, what the comfort zone actually means is not truly, or there's no true basis behind it for, any scientific concern. This despite the fact that activists are ramping up the pressure and a lot of controversy from different delegates to the actual climate conference slam each other for not trying to or not agreeing on that fossil fuel language. However, we do have our usual set of panelists today here at the COP conference. So first, I'd like to say, John, you got quite an interesting background there. If I remember right, is that a Pink Floyd song?
Well, Rock, I wish you were here at COP28. It's unfortunate you couldn't make it this year, but yeah, it's welcome to the machine is referring in. I'm here in the Fusion Pavilion, so fusion power, the sun's energy, and it's referring to the machine being tokamak, the facility being constructed in France that's intended to be a containment facility for the fusion reaction research. So very interesting pavilion. I attended some of the nuclear sessions today. Very, very interesting, and some people I did not expect. Did you know, Rock, that the 2023 Miss America is a nuclear engineering student slated to graduate in 5 days?
Wow.
Oh my, that is incredible.
Yeah. And she was sitting next to the U.S. Assistant Secretary of the Department of Energy for nuclear energy. So it was quite the combination. They were both graduates from the same university, University of Wisconsin-Madison. So it was an excellent session. I learned a lot, and hope to share that with you perhaps tomorrow.
Let's hope Miss America 2024 and 2025 are like astrophysicists or something. Then we get some more science into Miss America panel. Next, I'd like to introduce a guest speaker. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana Freling. Dana, would you mind doing the introductions for our guest speaker today?
Sure. So today's theme, we've been having themes every day during COP, and today's theme is youth and education and youth and empowerment and engagement to address this climate crisis. So today I would like to introduce Mohammed Ahmed, who is a Somali American. He was raised in the United States, but he has recently moved to Nairobi, Kenya. He's 19 years old, he's a college student, and he is a climate activist with us at the Environment and Climate Crisis Council and Democrats Abroad, active in other caucuses as well. And I thought this would be a very appropriate day to invite him on to give us his perspective from the global South. He has a unique perspective, having lived in Nairobi, having been raised within a Somali family. And I know he's been doing a little bit of homework today, and he has some interesting ideas and opinions, which he will share with us. So
Yeah, thank you, Dana, and hi, everybody. As Dana said, my name is Mohammed Ahmed. I currently live in Nairobi, Kenya. And yeah, just in this region where I am from, the Horn of Africa has seen unprecedented droughts and failed rainy season. So that's northeastern Kenya, southern Ethiopia, majority of Somalia, that, right? And then now recently, there have been heavy rains, which is causing massive floods. And that is disrupting life, that is disrupting, right, a place that is a region that is war-torn, a region that, has suffered through a lot of famines, and then this just adds on top to it. So that's something that is very hard to see every time because it's reported on the news. And that's something that I care about. Uh, and that's just like one aspect of what I would like to see, right, maybe even addressed. And, the fund is, that's good, but maybe we need to go more because that's the effects that climate change has on, right, regular people. It's majority of the greenhouse gases coming from, top emitters in Western countries, and, China and India, then affecting the global South. And you have, right, I think UNICEF says over 1 billion children and young people are in extreme climate, right, related regions in Africa alone. And that's something very much that needs to be addressed, especially where Africa's is, right, the youngest continent, a continent that is going to double in population, and with that we need to care about.
well, certainly, do you think that this idea of environmental justice, that the people who are most vulnerable, contributing the least to carbon emissions, do you feel that they're being assisted or are you following the negotiations now for loss and damage, Mohammed? Do you feel
Yes.
that this, on the ground, do you feel that these issues are being addressed where you are?
Yes and no. So of course, the loss and the damage fund is something big, and I think that is a beginning step, right? Step in the right direction. But also it's not affecting, or it's not getting down to, the regular people, the citizens, the people who will get affected. And that's something that's very hard. Even if you look at the loss and damage when it goes to governments. And yes, some governments can make it, go down to the regular people, but others cannot. We had the Africa Climate Summit here in September, and this was a big issue. But then at the same time, climate change activists, local climate change activists, were not allowed to attend. It was only business leaders and government agencies. And yes, they are part of the solution, but also we need to bring part of the solution, be local, be regional, because that is also how you get stuff done. You can't international, national, regional, local, everybody working together is how you get, you know, you stop climate change, you slow down climate change, you reverse climate change, and then you help the people who are affected by climate change. And that's something I'm not seeing at the moment, and something I hope to see in the future.
Do you feel like that young people understand the risks and the issues of climate change in your communities around you? Do you feel like there are mechanisms for youth to voice their opinions, to become a part of the leadership through education or other means?
I think we very much understand, and that, right, young people very much understand the effect of climate change because we see it, right? Climate change from something abstract to something that's lived in our daily lives, in the daily lives of, right, young people. And are they hard, right? We're trying to make our voices louder. And I think the only way to do that is if the people at the table invite and make space for young leaders and the young generation to have not only a say, but be part of that negotiations, those climate change decision-making bodies. Because the current decisions made at COP and any other climate summit and future decisions made by any other climate agency and stuff like that will all the people who would bear witness if it works are the future generations, and we inherit that. So if they don't have a say, if they're not at the table, then there's no way for us to make our ideas. We are one of the most diverse generations, right? We come from different backgrounds and we bring ideas that may be lacking from a world that seems, right now seems to be going to the right directions, but it's very slow. I think that the younger generation can very much speed it up. And we are inheriting this world. We didn't cause climate change, but it will be us who would face majority of the problems. So we do need not only a voice, but powers and positions in decision-making bodies.
Well, that's why I'm also so delighted and grateful to see how active you have been, Mohammed, with Democrats Abroad in helping Americans in Kenya and all around the globe, because you've risen up to leadership roles in the global organization. And you can make a difference in helping get this powerful voting bloc. Overseas Americans were 6.5 million eligible voters living overseas. We were the margin of victory in 2020. And it's inspiring to see people like you joining our ranks and helping to reach the young people, speak to the young people, cultivate your own voice, and become a leader in our organization. And I think that we are all grateful that you have come to join us,
Yeah.
Mohammed.
And thank you. And I agree with you, right? I think younger generations, not younger generation, millennials and Gen Z will soon be, I think, the majority voting bloc in the United States. And their voices need to be heard. I know one thing I'm trying to do right now is making other younger people, right, come into leadership positions. I, not just in caucuses, right, like the Global Youth Caucus, other caucuses, and even elected positions within Democrats Abroad, and then we start from there. And I'm very excited.
Well, we have a lot of work coming up in the next year, because as you know, the 2024 elections will decide not just the key climate agenda for the US, but that will translate into impact all over the world. It will really determine the global climate agenda. We have, it's a fractious time. It's not going to be easy, but we need to get out the Democratic vote. And we're grateful for people like you that can reach out and make sure that all of us, every last one, in the small corners where we meet them, are going to get registered the beginning of January, participate in the primaries, find out even in the primaries who are the really green candidates who are really working towards solving our environmental and climate problems, and help motivate others, lead others to where their questions can be answered. I know you're be a great ambassador for that.
Yes, thank you.
Mohammed, I had a question.
John?
Yeah.
So you're there in Nairobi, Kenya, correct? At a university.
Yes.
What are you studying, and what are your plans?
I'm studying political science. Plans, I have a lot not yet decided, but go into politics probably. But
Question.
I'm deciding in whether go to law school or not.
Question about things on the ground there in Kenya, and you may not be aware of this, but something you may want to look into while you're there. I've attended sessions at pavilions of other nations in Central Asia, Middle East, and elsewhere, and heard a common theme where climate change is having an impact on water and agriculture, stressing the rural communities and the farmers, forcing them to leave the rural landscape and move into the cities, creating all sorts of problems for the communities and the government. Is that a dynamic that is playing out in Kenya, or have you not had enough experience with the local situation to be able to assess that?
I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but similar problems are happening where, especially as I said, right, in northeast Kenya, the droughts, lack of rain, is forcing herders and farmers that live in the north to abandon their farms or their livestock, which are pretty much dead because of multiple failed rainy seasons. And then now what we're seeing is floods because the ground is because of how many seasons there was no rain. The ground is so hard that now there's massive floods in Somalia and in Kenya that roads are blocked and farmlands are just ruined. So that is something that is massively and I think the Kenyan government has also deemed it as a major priority for these coming years.
Well, thank you so much, Mohammed, for coming on our program today. We're very glad to have you here. I'm also glad to see that other youth are stepping up across the world, especially as many times it has been showcased that it is exceptionally important for young people to get other young people to get out the vote. No one stresses the importance of voting to other young people rather than other young people getting involved in the process. And it's different when some old fart from Washington D.C. is saying get out the vote, go vote, go vote, go vote, rather than some other young person saying it's literally our future on the line to go out there and get the vote out there to save our own butts. So thank you so much for what you're doing, Mohammed, and look forward to maybe continuing a good and productive relationship between us. So thank you so much. I think that a couple of really good points are brought up here, especially with regard to the COP event that I remember, right? And that's that very often I found that youth delegates who attended COP in the past were very often picked, right? Many of the folks who go through the United Nations youth program very often aren't there to criticize the UN or there in the strict interest of helping other young people. Many times they're there simply for their own future political careers, which is something that I found is quite sad and depressing from a Youth United Nations standpoint. Rarely are they from any sort of scientific background. Mostly they're there from political science backgrounds or, again, ladder climbing techniques to try to get to the top as fast as possible, rather than criticizing the UN for not including young people enough at these negotiations, at these deliberations. Rather, they are out there for their own sake and their own political careers, which I think does bring out a really good point that those aren't really the types of young people that we should be focused on to help either get out the vote or to help solve the climate crisis. And I think that if you've attended any of our briefings in the past, you'll notice that the best person to help you get out the vote and to help you rely on the science and to help you rely on solving the climate crisis is the person you look at in the mirror, which is yourself. Only you can vote for yourself. Only you can get out there, study the science, understand the science, so you know who to vote for when it's time to get on the campaign trail, and when it's time to start, donating your time to help get certain candidates elected. It really is about you and you yourself. You are the best person for this type of for these types of actions.
Well,
Amen.
Rock, I think the point you're making there is important. That it's essential that if young people like Mohammed can't be here, the type of people we do need here at the COP events, if they can't be here in person, we need to bring them in virtually and any other way we can possibly to help them be more effective in developing their experience and being more assertive in governance, both at the local, national, and international level.
Yeah, and that, springboards off the point that other young people are the best sorts of volunteers to get other young people to get out there and vote. It's incredibly difficult to watch, a white-haired old person from Washington tell you to go vote. It's much better to hear it from other young person who's telling you, yeah, this is, us on the line here. And also, appeals both emotionally and logically to our own futures. Well,
one thing I tell students, being one of those white-haired fellows now, that talking to that generation, the young generation, is that the thing that I didn't appreciate when I was young was the perspectives that I had then turned out to be correct. I thought I was deferring to the senior leadership because, gosh, they're doing things so much more differently than what my instincts tell me need to be done. They must know something I do not know. And what I've come to learn over the years is, no, they don't. They just have different priorities in life, and it is not to make the radical changes that are necessary to sustain this planet for future generations. So it's important that the students study hard, and as they say, protest harder.
Wonderfully said. Very wonderfully said. Thank you, John. I've come to learn just to trust you on this sort of thing.
Yeah, you'll say things like that until I sign your thesis.
I don't have a choice. Well, without further ado, I think as many of our viewers know, we have a wonderful segment that we do each day presented by our very own Michal Fidler, who goes over what it's like to be on the ground over at COP28 in Dubai. So without further ado, Michal, I give the floor to you and your wonderful photos and demonstration.
Oh, thank you, Rock, for the floor. I have a set of photos prepared. Today it's actually a summary of 2 days. Few photos from yesterday, from the day off. I couldn't resist and had to go and see small parts of the town. And of course, there will be few images from today as well. Now, let me share my screen. And here is the first image of the day. That's from yesterday when I went to see the Museum of the Future Dubai. I knew about this building. Dana told me about it as well a few days ago, and I knew I really want to go there and see it. It's amazing. I took a metro to get there, and this is just the corridor from the metro to the actual museum. It's already very futuristic just to walk to the museum. And when I entered, once again, I just had to say, wow, the building is amazing. It's really futuristic. I walked around. There was a crowd, so I didn't really get in. I just walked around and saw some very futuristic things. I did not really understand what they were. I think this was, you could use an application to prepare your perfume, if I got that correctly. This was a counter where you ordered your tickets. It looked also very modern or futuristic. This seemed to be either origami, or this might have been also how the trees in the future will look like. I cannot tell. Then I had to go to the bathroom, and I had to report that in the future there probably still need to be some guys from Indonesia or Philippines who will be cleaning the toilet. So the future is not safe yet. A few more images from the interior of the building. It's unique. It is really very, very special. It's just few images from outside. I don't really know what to add. It was unique, and whoever is in Dubai should go and at least look around this building. It's on a small hill like that, and through the window there you can also see the highest building of the world, Burj Khalifa. When I went to see this place, I thought this was enough for the evening, but I was not lazy. Took 2 more bus stops, metro stops, and went to see another building, which is called the Dubai Frame. I don't fully understand the purpose of the building. It's kind of difficult to photograph it. Basically, these are 2 towers, about 150 meters tall, and on the top there is a bridge, and it serves like a museum or a viewing platform. But there are so many various towers in Dubai that I don't really see a point of having another 2 towers there like that. So it's the biggest frame or largest frame in the world, and it's difficult to photograph it because it's really just there is a space in between, so there is not much to photograph. Fortunately, I found an angle I was happy with, so this would be the image of the frame of Dubai frame. Now, this was the part about visiting the city yesterday, and let's go to today's COP. As soon as I entered, there was a small protest. It's the second protest, but I've seen one last week, maybe 10 or so people. Today, the crowd was a little larger. Of course, it's nothing what we have seen in Glasgow or Madrid when there were tens or actually hundreds, thousands of people. I would estimate the crowd maybe 100, 150 people. It was organized by the Fridays for Future. So I walked with the crowd, and they decided to have a silent protest. So they walked around, and I was surprised, but the security actually allowed them to enter the area which is usually closed. So they had to pre-arrange it, but they were allowed in. And then we walked all together in a complete silence. Nobody said a word. Somebody wanted to shout the usual, what do we want, climate justice, and he immediately stopped because it was just a very, very silent protest with hands in the air, just like this. Then we entered the Al-Babha theater, and I was hoping something was going to happen, but the protest just ended there. The young people sat there in silence. There was a row of empty chairs between them and the other delegates. And maybe after 10, 15 minutes, they started to leave the area again. So it was just a silent protest, and that would be about that. There were a few other, I wouldn't say protests, there were some displays, and people were walking around. This group of Koreans, I have seen them at least 3 or 4 times walking with these displays. And of course, you have to notice the girl on the right. And I was just curious, who is she? So I talked to her, and she's not just a climate activist, but she's Miss Samoa 2023. Very beautiful girl. And then I got a phone call from John. Hey, there is Miss America 2023. Oh, I went there and I saw Miss America 2023, and look at the face of John. He was probably very happy that he talked to her. As he mentioned, she's a nuclear scientist or nuclear engineer, or a very, very unique person. So I want to take a few images of her, but this old guy on the right now, he was just standing in the photo, so I couldn't get a shot of her, or just her. No, unfortunately, this is the best shot of her I have. After seeing Miss America, I moved to the youth pavilion, because today the topic was youth and education, and I was just curious what was going on there. There were some very unique technologies. This was something between virtual reality and augmented reality. You basically open the door, and on the glass there was a screen where there was some AI or AR or VR person explaining stuff about climate change. I did not really understand the technology, but it looked very, very unique. There were some discussions in the youth pavilion. I'm kind of sorry to say, but that it was not really that much. Most the discussions, I didn't really see many discussions there. Most of it was about some art. People were doing various drawings. There were many kids drawing there. Then there was also a lot of singing and some dancing. And in one of the booths, there was also this guy. He was in the entertainment and culture pavilion. I have seen him before in Madrid, where he got arrested because he was protesting very hard. I remember him. And I think he's from Fiji. And here he was doing, I could not really understand what it was. It looked something like yoga, but it's Fiji yoga. I could not really tell. And then for some reason, he started to do a lot of noises, and he was singing. It sounded to me like the war dancing from Fiji or Samoa. He was extremely loud, and in the open space, all you could hear was just him. The people were trying to have discussions, and it was not possible. He was just fighting the bad spirits there in a very, he tried very hard to get the bad spirits out of there. So I walked to the other end of the open space, and there was this guy playing a guitar and singing the song On the Rivers of Babylon. I don't know whether it's appropriate for that pavilion, but he was there. So I walked to the next floor, to the second floor of the building, and there was this guy. I think he's some sort of YouTuber or TikToker or influencer. I can't really tell. And he had the largest crowd in the whole open space. So I paid attention what he was doing, and he was talking about AR, augmented reality, and its connection to climate change. Well, I think augmented reality is really a cool thing, but what he was trying to explain, it didn't make any sense to me, because he was talking about stuff like enhance the empower people, give them the experience, engage them, and use the AR for it. And then he was talking, so if you have something to say about rhinos, use a rhino image. And you can see it on the screen right there. What was that? I thought it was just embarrassing, and I have just a certain limit of embarrassment I can take every day. And I said, God, I cannot take this anymore, because if the guy is telling me do a story on rhinos and wear this thing on your head, I cannot take it. So I said, God, this is enough. Please help me get me out of here. And guess what? God really helped, because right across the street from the youth pavilion, there is a faith pavilion. I did not know about it until today. And there were various preachers and leaders of various faiths, and they were delivering their message in very, in the way I would expect it to be happening at COP. There were also discussions between leaders of various faiths. And suddenly, I just calmed down after all the embarrassment I have seen in the previous pavilion. So just maybe one or two more images from the faith pavilion, and then I walked around, and there were more performances today. This girl was wearing a dress which looked like a burning forest, and then it got busy again, because just next to this girl with the burning forest dress, there was Alok Sharma, the COP26, I believe, Glasgow president. I walked another 10 meters, and there was another performance or starting protest. So it was really busy in that area. I walked another 5-10 meters, and there was another small group of protesters getting ready. So I was feeling already pretty overwhelmed, because every 10 seconds there was something completely new I have not experienced at COP yet. So I decided to calm down and walk to the plenary, where there was Sultan Al-Jaber and the various parties. And I knew that it was going to be calm, because they were repeating their messages over and over, basically saying what we have heard 100 times or 1,000 times. We need to act, we need to deliver, we need to tackle the issue. So at this point, at this plenary, I finally calmed down and ended my day. And this would be the last image of the day, which should be related, well, to the youth. You can see the expression of the girl on the right, and you can see the 4 people on the left-hand side who might be taking COP just a photo opportunity. And with this being said, I'm turning it back to you, Rock.
Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say we always thoroughly enjoy your demonstration and showcasing of the photos. For those of us not in Dubai, it really does show a nice window through that big frame about what it means to be attending Dubai at this moment in COP28. I am actually kind of curious if you ask that AI program that you were photographing, what it would say if we asked it if we'd survive, or if AI maybe will survive after us. Now, our next showcase here is actually going to be an interview with someone from EESI, and I was curious, John, would you like to introduce the speaker from this interview?
Thank you, Rock. Well, the fellow that I interviewed, Daniel Brissett, and he's someone you and I met last year when we went to the Water Keepers Conference, and you and I delivered a session on regenerative agriculture and its benefits to climate and water quality. we walked a couple of blocks down the street afterward and visited with Daniel in his DC office. And they're one of the most important environmental information sources for members of Congress. And knowing that he would be here, I gave him a call and asked if he'd speak with us for a few minutes. And then after the interview, I attended a press conference he was holding and met some very interesting people. It was a council of mayors from smaller cities along the Mississippi Valley. So very interesting activities of this organization. And Daniel will talk a little bit about them in his responses to my questions.
All right, very good. And without further ado, I'm going to showcase the interview with Daniel Brissett from EESI.
We are talking with Daniel Brissett, president of the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, EESI, in Washington, D.C. Daniel, I've learned so much from attending your organization's frequent briefings over the past 5 or 6 years, but your group has been around much longer. Can you tell us about EESI and its mandate?
Sure thing, John. And first of all, thanks to you for the opportunity to talk with you today. And I know you've been a regular briefing attendee over many years, and we really appreciate that support. Glad that you've been able to find our resources useful. So you're right, EESI has been around. Our work started in 1984. We were founded by a bipartisan group of members of Congress, specifically to provide educational resources to policymakers about environmental and energy, and then ultimately climate change topics. And so that's the biggest chunk of what we do these days. Our work takes many forms. We do briefings like you're familiar with. We also do a lot of writing, fact sheets, issue briefs, and we've just started a podcast a couple years ago. And everything is nonpartisan. We try to make it science-based, and everything is available free and online at our website, www.eesi.org.
And where do you find that your organization has had its greatest impact? Is it through direct communications with the members of Congress, or perhaps instead with their staff? And if so, which staff positions in particular tend to be the best conduit for getting key information to the representatives and the senators? And what about the congressional committees and their staff?
Well, I think in terms of committees and members and staff, it's all of the above. Members have very limited time. They're working on any number of issues at once, but they all have congressional staff. They all have legislative correspondents, legislative assistants. Committees have professional staff, research assistants. And so I think it's fair to say that while we do engage with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle on a regular basis, most of our resources are really designed to be consumed by the congressional staff person. Now, there are congressional staff people, let's say, who work for the House Energy and Commerce Committee or the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and maybe they have a master's degree or another advanced degree in a climate change topic. They're going to use our resources, sure, but what we're really looking at is making our resources available to kind of the rank and file member staff, the staff who work for members who maybe don't sit on the committees of jurisdiction but still have to take votes. They still have to think about their positions. They still have to answer their constituents' mail. And so, we're happy if we're talking with a member. We're just as happy if we're talking to a staff person. And we're honestly just as happy as if we're talking to an intern, because ultimately they're often the ones who write the memos that the staff rely on to help their bosses sort of navigate policy topics. So, we try to do all of the above. And I guess I forgot what the middle part of your question was.
No, you covered it pretty well.
Oh, did I? Okay,
yeah,
good.
It was basically representatives, staff, and committees.
Great.
And where do you think is the best opportunity for bipartisan cooperation on climate-related legislation? For example, I sense that one of these areas of potential agreement may be the investment in the new generation of nuclear power plants.
Yeah, I actually think there are a fair number of areas of bipartisan interest in climate change topics. Whether everyone calls it a climate change topic is another matter. But, if you think about the last several years, we are, for good reason, focused on the Inflation Reduction Act, the $369 billion investment in climate solutions, the biggest ever. But right before that, the year before that happened, there was the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. passed with overwhelmingly bipartisan support in the Senate and bipartisan support in the House. $550 billion of new spending, $1.2 trillion total. That was a big bill. And it started out as a transportation bill, and then it evolved into an infrastructure bill. And it covered lots of different topics, including many that will have climate benefits, like electric vehicle charging infrastructure and schools and buildings and energy efficiency and things like that. A bill that isn't quite as well known happened the year before in 2020. Believe it or not, one of the last things Congress did in 2020 was pass the Energy Act of 2020, which was a bipartisan bill championed by Senator Murkowski, who at that time was chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, of Inflation Reduction Act fame. And that was a policy bill that changed, made a number of different improvements across sort of U.S. energy policy. And again, passed with strong bipartisan support. And you may say, well, 2020, who was president back then? That's right, President Trump actually signed that bill into law. So there's been a lot of action over the last few years. In terms of where there may be opportunities going forward, you identified nuclear energy, I think especially around research and development into small modular reactors and other advanced nuclear technologies. I think there is a lot of interest in that. I think there's a lot of interest in emerging technologies like direct air capture, green hydrogen. I think there's a lot of interest in community resilience and climate adaptation. A lot of where there's interest is often where communities are front and center. Helping communities be more resilient to severe weather, for example, or helping communities prepare themselves for the next severe weather event. And while weather and climate are not the same thing, severe weather is more intense and it's more frequent than it used to be because of climate change. The other is sort of around the innovation and research and development. And that's where I think nuclear energy and hydrogen would fall into, and direct air capture would fall in. Carbon dioxide removal would be another one. Opportunities perhaps for U.S. companies to innovate, to come up with new solutions that can be used here at home to reduce emissions, but also might be exported to other countries.
Yeah, I just attended a session in the U.S. Center that was focused exactly on that, on U.S. government support for export-oriented, climate-related businesses.
Yep.
So it was very interesting. So that was the good news. What about the bad news? What are some of the greatest challenges in getting agreement on essential congressional action on climate?
Well, I think there are challenges that are less specific to climate and more just specific to the institution we're talking about. I mean, Congress generally, as an institution, is deadline driven. It passes an appropriations bill the day it's due, or it passes an authorization bill the day it's due. It tends to deal with things, sort of not as they come up, but instead at the last possible moment. That's one issue. The other is just that there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of bandwidth challenges of members of Congress. At any given moment, sure, many of them are talking and thinking about climate change, but many of them are also thinking about the war in Iraq, the war in Ukraine. They're thinking about the war in Gaza. They're thinking about healthcare. They're thinking about prescription drug coverage. They're thinking about artificial intelligence. They're thinking about any number of issues that, whether they're their own personal priorities or not, are often the issues of the day. And while climate change is pervasive, it's all around us. Oftentimes it only kind of pops up and makes it through, when something really bad happened, when there are really severe wildfires, for example, or when the National Climate Assessment is released, or when the world gathers at the Conference of Parties in Dubai, where we are right now. I think there are some sort of climate-specific challenges. I don't think there's a ton of agreement on sort of what the right package of solutions are. I think you'll find that there are members who are really interested in innovation, first and foremost. There are members who are really interested in finding ways to keep, especially natural gas operations, online longer and profitable longer. There are some members who are much more focused in, sort of mobility and, more systemic changes in terms of how, we get around, for example. There are some members who, are really focused on voluntary measures and incentives. There are some who feel that a more regulatory, a more legislative approach is necessary. But, that's always the way it is. There are always lots of, sort of different, competing trains of thought and lines of thought. And that's why it's really important for members to talk to each other, to work together, to find opportunities where there are bipartisan agreements so that we can get solutions in place now, new policies, investments, if that's possible now, and then we can continue working on some of the things that maybe we haven't gotten to the point of agreement yet on.
And you mentioned just a few moments ago that you'd interacted with our congressional delegation here. Who's here? How many? What about, how many representatives, senators, governors, secretaries, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, it's a long list. So we actually have a tracker of U.S. officials at COP28. It's in our daily newsletter, COP Dispatch. We update it as often as we can. There's a couple different delegations. The one that's here right now, when we're making this on December 6th, there's a bipartisan group of Senate staff who are here. There's more than 24 of them, and they've been here for a few days, and they'll start rolling out. They've been organized by the Senate Budget Committee. There will also be a Senate delegation, a bipartisan Senate delegation led by Senator Cardin. They'll be arriving a little bit later this week. The highest profile delegation is probably the House Energy and Commerce delegation. That's being led by the chair of the committee, Kathy McMorris Rogers, and the ranking member, Frank Pallone. A number of different members on both sides of the aisle will be here for a few days later this week under that aegis. We'll also be seeing members show up from the Conservative Climate Caucus. That's the organization that Representative John Curtis and Representative Marianne Miller Meeks organizes. And then there's also the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and they'll be here as well. So all told, there'll be several dozen there'll be multiple dozen members, and we're expecting a good bipartisan group. And then right now, there are a little bit over 24 congressional staff.
A couple of years ago, I brought a group of graduate student leaders to a hearing of the House Climate Committee chaired by Representative Castor. She was very gracious in allowing us entry. There was a lot of rancor between the members of the committee. When it comes to staff, does that translate, or staff different creatures and you find a little more reception to your messages without often the posturing?
Well, it's a great question. In terms of congressional staff have a tough job. There's only a few hundred of them, or several hundred of them, at any given moment that have a climate portfolio. I was a Senate staff person. I worked in the Senate for 6 years. I started in the press office and then moved over to a committee office and then stayed with my same boss in the personal office. It's a tough job, and you're often on the younger side, oftentimes without advanced degrees. But more than anything, Capitol Hill is a very fast-paced place. And so the information demands are great. And congressional staff, I've often said that Congress is the best place to be curious because you have people constantly trying to give you information. Now, oftentimes that information comes from special interest, which is fine. But what we try to do at ESI is we try to really orient our resources to be nonpartisan and science-based, so that when a staff person gets a tough question from their boss about any climate change topic, my goal is for them to think, well, I wonder what ESI has. And if they're going to Google, direct air capture, let's say, I hope they Google EESI, direct air capture, and they'll find our briefing that we did last year. So I think our approach is that if we can make the lives of a staff person easier by helping them get the information they need to either answer their boss's questions or respond to a constituent request, then we're that further we're that further down the line. We've perhaps ingratiated ourselves a little bit and will be considered an ongoing resource. In terms of how staff get along, it depends on the individual staff. When I was on the Hill, I took great trips. They were bipartisan, had a ton of fun, got a chance to meet people. The group here is a really great group. Like I said, it's bipartisan. I knew most of the staff before I met them here, and it's a really great group. And I hope, and I really have a lot of confidence that they're learning a lot from the experience, but also learning a lot about each other, and hopefully that'll translate to positive relationships back in DC.
So we've talked a lot about your organization, what it does, how it interacts with Congress and the staff. Relative to your mission and the external groups, how can politically active people as individuals or through their organizations help your group in educating members of Congress and driving action?
Well, ESI, we're a 501c3 organization, so we don't engage in any political activity. We don't have a grassroots advocacy operation. I'm pleased that people participate in our democracy, but that's really outside of our remit. We don't really engage there. But we do produce resources that happen to be very, very attractive to the general public. So much in the same way that an average staff person has a learning curve ahead of them with climate policy and climate change topics. Average people do too, and they find our resources really accessible and really usable. And a lot of people, download our materials. Hundreds of thousands of people visit our website every year. They're not all congressional staff. A lot of them are just ordinary people who are interested in topics and who come to us to learn more, which is great because a more informed public is a better public. We see a lot of our resources, for example, show up in op-eds and letters to the editor about climate change topics, and people cite the resources that we're able to produce. And then organizations, we have a fairly extensive network, thankfully, of organizations. Many of those organizations are politically active. I know that sometimes they use our resources and they distribute them to their members. That's great. I want everybody to use our resources because I know they're really, really good. But, we don't really engage that deeply in lobbying. We lobby from time to time, but we don't engage that deeply in it, and we don't do grassroots. We don't really ask people, individual human beings, to take their call to action to Capitol Hill on our behalf.
So primarily through the educational materials you provide, educated me on many topics, and I bring that to my organizations, and it's the foundation of many of my activities. And more on the learning curve, how does your organization integrate university students into its activities, and how many of your prior young people that engaged in your office have gone on to staff positions that you interact with later on?
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely do. I would say there's probably a couple different ways, primary ways we engage with university students. One is a lot of university students use our resources. Some of them are local, and we've gotten to know some professors in the DC area, and we know that they use our resources, which is great. But we're always very pleased to see who's downloading our resources, and when they have a .edu email address, it's great. We want everyone to take advantage. And one plug for our resources, we spend a lot of time with citations. So even if our resource maybe isn't exactly answering the question, it's often a great lead to get to the sources of information or the resources and the other materials that might actually help you or help a student complete a research paper or an essay topic or whatever else it happens to be. The other thing we do is we offer internships to undergraduate students, and we typically have 3 to 4 interns any given semester. I think on average we have about 13 a year, and they are great to work with. They're super enthusiastic. We have a great program to help introduce them to the life in DC, to help expose them to the legislative process. Some of them help with our development work. Some of them help with our communications work. They're paid, of course, because that's only fair, and they're in DC, and so it's a great learning experience just kind of being in the environment of where policy is made. We also have expanded over the last few years into scholarships. We have a scholarship program that we manage, or that we administer in partnership with UNCF, which is formerly the United Negro College Fund, and we're actually going to be making some announcements about our next set of scholarships to students of color who attend historically black colleges and universities in the Mid-Atlantic. So I would say that there are lots of ways we engage with university students, and if any students are out there and they have questions, all of our contact information is on the website, and I'm sure any of us would be happy to get in touch and to help you learn a little bit more.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for your time. And you mentioned you had a press conference coming up later today. I'm looking forward to that. But your comments have been very informative, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John. It's always great to see you. It's kind of too bad we have to go all the way to Dubai to see each other, but that's just kind of the way it is. And hope you have a good rest of your trip.
Thank you. Thank you again, Daniel.
It's always a pleasure to hear from Daniel. He's very well informed, and every discussion I've ever had with him, he's clearly on the ball. And it was really good to hear that there were some potential bipartisan solutions and potential points of agreement. I think we have a couple minutes to deliberate upon that interview there. John, if you have anything to add about any of the post, discussion content you had mentioned, going to a briefing with him afterwards.
Well, first, I'd like to emphasize how he talked about the information resources that EESI provides. You're, in fact, an example of a university student who's used the EESI resources. The regenerative agriculture briefing they had led you to some important documents that have appeared in your literature review. And I'm sure that's true for students all across the United States and perhaps even other nations. And this was a long interview, but I think he had a lot to say and a lot that's relevant to our audience, you know, people who are interested in what Congress is doing. So if you follow what EESI is broadcasting in their briefings, you're pretty much getting the same information that members of Congress and their staff are getting. So it gives you some insights into the perspectives that they may be adopting and the information they're basing it on.
Very true. If any of our listeners want to follow EESI, I believe it's www.eesi.org. Yeah, wonderful content. Thank you so much, John, for asking those poignant questions. And of course, for sending me the information, which I am now using in my thesis. Okay, we are pretty close to our final segment here, or, you know, that was our final segment here. So if anybody, as always, has any questions, please feel free to send them to us. We're very happy to go over them in our next briefing, which will be tomorrow. But for now, we're so glad that each and every one of you have attended our briefing today. So without further ado, we wish you the best of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.